So welcome everyone. This is a very important BBL session because we have the founding director of HCI himself. Thank you for coming. And to talk about Ben, there's a lot to talk about him. You can have actually a tour of how the BBL, the HCIL started and the HCIL.
Hey.
Yes. So Ben is a computer scientist from the computer science department at University of Maryland. He, as I said before, he's the founding director of NCIL. He started all these, and it's going pretty well. Thanks to you. And this is a great community. Actually, you can see every week we see a lot of people coming up and talking about them. It's a very good community which is building up. And he's a member of the National Academy of Engineering as well. And if you could go to the HCIL building, you can see a lot of arts, which is all pictures taken by him, and you have some free maps which he's famous for. And we have with the title called "Every Algorithm Has an Art in It."
Every algorithm has an art.
Yeah. So without delaying it, let me get the.
Thank you. Okay, I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you. Be back here. It's a pleasure. I appreciate your welcoming me. This is a bit of a challenging talk for me as I try out a new idea and a new direction which I hope will be influential to your thinking and push me along in my thinking. Okay, so let's see. Let's take some of the light down. Okay. One more. This is the last one. Okay, so as always, I'm happy to proud to represent the HCIL. Now on its 8th director, Nicholas Elmquist, and has a long history of many important contributions and successes. There are more than 1,000 papers on our website, 300 videos, 200 project reports, and lots of other information. The collaboration between computer science and college of information studies continues in a successful, positive way. And these other units around campus are also part of it. I think HCIL is just wonderfully located here, more in the center of campus, and brings people from around campus in a unique way that really contributes to its richness and the diversity of its work. My own work is maybe best captured in the story of the field and the book Designing the User Interface, which is now in its 6th edition, required 5 co-authors to help tell the story of the remarkable success of this field and making sure that 6 billion people in the world have something like this in their pockets and they can use it. The book covers notions of theories and guidelines and principles that cover the wide range of issues. We'll come back to that. Just some of the taglines about where I come from. In this lab, in these very rooms, in the mid-'80s, we developed the idea of the light blue highlighted link, and the idea that you would click on something and go somewhere. That was the work that was done here. There were about a dozen student projects that evaluated different strategies. You wouldn't think that was necessary, but we had many different studies with user studies that demonstrated its value, and we developed a commercial product called Hyperties, which had a commercial success in the late 80s, and then Tim Berners-Lee, who was one of our colleagues, picked up on this idea, and in the Spring '89 Manifesto for the Web, he cites the work that we had done for the idea of, we call these embedded menus, and he was wise enough to call them hot links and hot spots. So that idea has traveled really well. Sometimes little ideas go a long way. The idea of little touch screens, little keyboards was also the work here, and the early work here led to the kind of design that's still on the Apple, that when you put your finger down you can scroll it around, you get other options, and it activates when you lift off, not when you land on. And that allowed us to shrink a 9-inch wide keyboard on a touch screen to a 7-inch, to a 5-inch, and a 3-inch. And the reviewers, for some of the papers on the high precision touchscreen idea, did not believe that we could do this. And therefore we made this video from which this image is taken. When you put your finger down, you get a crosshairs above your finger, which you can then drag around and activate and lift off. Steve Jobs visited our lab to see this work and had a memorable day. And that idea traveled very well. I was a consultant for Apple for 5 years, so I can see how those things work. Photo tagging was also developed here by students and implemented in systems, and I hold a patent for the idea of tagging photos, which has been copied, expanded, and improved. And there you see some of the ACIL happy faces on one of our early days when we went skiing in the afternoon. We would, on a good snowy day at 3:30, we'd quit and drive out to Whitetail in Pennsylvania, and that was us over there. And so that's the kind of fun we had, and I hope you are still having. But many of you know me for my information visualization work, and the idea of Spotfire began here in this lab with the paper in the Chi Conference of 1994. The company was formed in 1997. We grew to 200 people, and it was bought in 2007. So it was very great satisfaction as an academic to be able to see how the entrepreneurial directions can go forward. Spotfire pioneered the idea of dynamic query sliders, these double box sliders that you could slide back and forth. And then here you see 5 different windows, but you could also have 25 windows, and that's what you need to be able to look at high-dimensional data. Not a single view that shows everything, but multiple views that are coordinated, and within 150 milliseconds as you drag this, all of these update, even with million-item databases. And that idea, of course, was spread to others, our colleagues that formed Tableau, and if you know, Tableau has grown to be a huge success, and 2 months ago was purchased for $15 billion. So InfoViz is well on its way, and ACIL has remained a leader in InfoViz, now championed by Nicholas Helmquist. The tree maps that were mentioned there, this shows you the stock market with the area for each stock is proportional to its market valuation. So Apple's the big one, and Google, and Facebook, and ExxonMobil. The green indicates they're rising compared to yesterday, and the red indicates they're falling. So the utility sector is down this day. The 11 sectors of the stock market are mapped out by this tree map strategy. And one of the satisfactions of tree maps was that it became a standard part of Excel in 2014. So that too, it took a longer time than I thought it would, but it did travel and still continues to travel well as part of Tableau and other tools. NodeXL is a network visualization tool built into Excel. It's the most widely used tool for network visualization and analysis education. This shows the polarized voting patterns in the U.S. Senate, where the red Republicans are quite different from the blue Democrats, and the separation. We were the first to show that kind of image in terms of co-voting patterns. We've just published the 2nd edition of the book on analyzing social media networks, and last week I bought a few copies. Eric's got a copy, Nicholas got a copy, and you can take a look if you want to do that. EventFlow, our work in electronic medical records over the last 2 decades, matured into this tool called EventFlow, and here we see hundreds of patients, small number, but hundreds of patients at Children's Hospital. We believe that working with real partners off campus on real problems gave us better theories. That's the central idea that I've been promoting, and I encourage you in your work also to work on real problems. Get out of the lab, get beyond what you think are the real problems, and work with people who are problem owners. And that partnership of problem owners and theory-driven academics produces better results than working independently. And the results are dramatic. The paper we published showed 5 to 8 times as many citations, 5 to 8 times as many citations for papers which have at least one co-author who's not an academic. It's an amazing and startling result. But that's not today's talk, that's another talk. So today's talk is a rather larger vision of sort of take a breath, sink back in your chair, close your eyes maybe, and think about bigger thoughts here. And the topic I want to take you is to a larger historic vision of a discussion that's been going on for 2,000 years, or longer, between rationalism and empiricism. Rationalism was represented by Aristotle and later Descartes, Cartesian coordinates, Cartesian thinking, and the belief of the rationalists was of the logical perfectibility of human endeavors, that you could make a mathematically correct and understandable view of the world which was correct and was permanent and durable. Okay? By contrast, the empiricists needed to continuously refine their beliefs based on experiences. They got out of the lab, they went into the field. Leonardo, famously, of empiricists. Galileo sitting, watching the candelabra swinging in the church and understanding the principles of pendulum and therefore gravity. Leonardo grinding his lenses, looking at the moons of Jupiter and proclaiming that the moons of Jupiter were moving. A remarkable, revolutionary idea which got him into a lot of trouble. Remember, when you have new ideas, you can get into a lot of trouble. So be careful with new ideas, they're powerful. So Leonardo, Galileo, Locke, Hume, and in this century, Ronald Fisher, I guess I dropped that print. Ronald Fisher represented the statistical methods and the rationalist belief, and John Tukey developed the ideas of computer graphics and visualization. And those continue now, and that debate continues on the AI versus HCI spectrum. So now remember, both of these approaches are valuable. I'm not trying to dismiss either one. I'm trying to make you aware that there are different ways of looking at the world. Each one has its strengths, each one has its weaknesses, and you will be a better researcher if you understand these both perspectives. If you shift your attention from one approach to the other approach, and then look at a problem from two different approaches, that will make you a better researcher. Okay? So that's the deep and underlying issue. And the way it's manifest these days is in between the belief that's quite pervasive that AI is the future, and that machines will be thinking, that machines will be our partners, our collaborators, our teammates, and that machines will certainly eventually achieve artificial general intelligence, AGI. Okay? And that they will exceed human abilities. That's the pervasive belief. This belief that computers would exceed human abilities in about 20 years has been a persistent notion for about 80 years. And yet, I think we still appreciate the unbounded creative capabilities of people. And we see, even as machines become increasingly more powerful, we are more and more clear that the right design is a tool-like design that empowers people. And that's the theme, and how are we going to get there, and how does that design look like? So the notion that machines are thinking is not just the recent years, it's not just a product of machine learning and deep learning and neural networks, but these ideas go back certainly to Alan Turing's article, Can Machines Think, in 1950, but these journalistic variations of them, as well as the Hollywood variations, have continued to build, and they've been dangerous and counterproductive. Other books that are more serious and substantive have talked about the rise of robots. Martin Ford's book, which predicts widespread unemployment, will come about because automation and robots will take over. Now, that idea, which goes back to about 2012, was developed at a time after the Great Recession where unemployment was quite high. But that's totally turned around, and that prediction has demonstrated to become just incorrect, just not correct. The Economist magazine recently had a cover story which said, hey, AI people, look around. It's not working out the way you think it is. Okay? And we see quite a different change. In 2012, Amazon bought Kiva Robotics, everyone believed would automate the fulfillment centers and there'd be Amazon without anybody working. Well, Amazon went from 100,000 employees to 625,000 employees. And Amazon now has 30,000 open positions ready to hire. Low positions, but also high positions. And its expansion into Northern Virginia is another indicator of what's happening. So when automation done right happens, what happens is the price of good production goes down, the quality goes up, the volume and the demand increase, and you get more demand. So Amazon increased its workforce by a factor of 6, but it increased its services by a factor of 20. And that's what automation does when done correctly. And we see that again and again, from the textile workers of the 1800s to the bank tellers. In the 1960s, the belief was bank tellers would put bank employees out of work. There are now more bank employees than there were then. Because as you lower the price and you increase the service, there's more services. There are credit cards, there's mortgages, there's many other banking services. So the right kind of automation, and that's the distinction we're going to be making today between inappropriate automation and autonomy and the way we want to make it turn out. Okay, that's the distinction. We're all in favor of automation. We're all in favor of technology to serve human needs, but we want to get it done the right way. Okay? Now, there are counter forces. These books, maybe my favorite is Cathy O'Neill's book, Weapons of Math Destruction. If I would encourage you to read one, it would be that one. She goes through and describes how AI technologies, machine learning, can result in biased decisions about hiring and firing, about gaining admission to colleges, about parole, granting mortgages, and other consequential decisions. So she's told the story in a very powerful way. These other books get to other parts of the story. And just last week, this book came out, a very thoughtful one. Gary Marcus is a clever professor from NYU who started his company that got bought by Uber. And he makes the point that AI, what we read about AI strikes us as pure fantasy predicated on confidence in AI's imagined strengths that bears no relation to current technological capability. So I'm a great fan of the first half of the book. He actually spoke here in Washington on Saturday night. I went to see him there. I met him before, but he gave a very good talk about how AI doesn't really work out as well. His examples are compelling. Where I differ with him is where the future goes. He wants to double down, and he wants to push on to deep understanding and have machines that, he doesn't use the term artificial general intelligence, but his phrase is deep understanding and common sense knowledge. Now, we will get more powerful, more effective AI designs, and machine learning is a strong advance. But I suggest there's going to be another direction. And that other direction is the HCI approach. We've already shown our impact and power by serving 6 billion users with devices in their pockets and so on, mobile, desktop, web, and cloud. And one of the virtues that this audience and this group exemplifies is that we really believed in inclusive design. We really believe designing for everyone. And when you design for men and women, for old and young, for abled and non-abled, for literate and illiterate, each design gets better for everyone. That's the secret. That when you design for a diverse set of people, you make it better for everyone. And we've seen that play out, and Greg Vanderheiden is a hero for having played this out, and the tools on your Macs and PCs are a direct result of the work of Greg over the past 50 years. It's coming up on it. So we've seen how that worked out as a huge success story. We also devoted ourselves to diverse applications with real problems, real users, and real data, and then diverse interfaces that built on theories, principles, and guidelines. And just to cite from the Apple Guidelines documents, and the way I see the research in HCI, that the thousands of researchers in HCI produced the papers which led to the guidelines documents, which led to the 2 million apps on the Apple Store and the billions of people who use it. In that Apple Design Guideline, it says, it stresses users are in control. People, not apps, are in control. Very powerful phrase. Flexibility, give users complete fine-grained control over their work. This is a very different scenario from what you hear about how the machines will automate and do the job for you. It's you do the job for yourself. The sense of self-efficacy is central. So the AI principles which I want to change are, and I'm not going to talk much about humanoid robots, but humanoid robots have been a long-standing idea, 300 years going back, And in the 1770s, watchmakers made human-sized robots that played musical instruments, that wrote poems, and sketched, and did paintings, or not paintings, but sketches with pencils. Okay? And those become only the museum pieces of the next century. In the same way that the Walt Disney auto animatronics are cute and so on, and the progression of humanoid robots has really gone, as far as I can say, nowhere except maybe crash test dummies for automobiles, right? That's kind of the great success story. But I don't think we're going to see robots walking around the streets with us. One scenario I saw, if the airport of the future was when you get out of your car, a robot will greet you, will take your suitcases and lead you through the airport. And you'll follow the robot, a humanoid-looking robot. I could just imagine the congestion in the airport from such a scenario. And yet, that is pervasive and persistent. So that, I think, is going to change. The other, I'm not going to talk more about that, but that's, I think, the key one is excessive automation. And the idea of autonomy, and again, I'll repeat the notion that computers will be on. There you go, an escaped robot. So, the idea that computers will be our partners, teammates, or collaborators, I think sends the wrong message and gives us the wrong kind of design. And there are many other aspects that I think are there, but I'm going to focus really on the excessive automation. So what I want to achieve in a positive way, and I hope to put your emphasis, these words have been around for a long time, but I just want you to soak in them. I want you to just saturate yourself with the idea, that's my phone, that the goal is to amplify, augment, enhance, and empower people, okay? So as to build their sense of self-efficacy, their sense of control, of mastery, of accomplishment. That's what people want, I believe. And the goal is thousand-fold improvements in human capabilities. I'm not interested in making a machine that does what a human does. I want a machine that enables me to do something 1,000 times better. So the web and getting information has certainly done that. And Wikipedia have transformed the way we think and the way we solve problems, the way we go about the world. Information search and Google have certainly accomplished it. Email and text have also, maybe 100 years ago, only leaders of countries could reach 1,000 people within 24 hours. And now high school kids have audiences of 1 million people as they reach with their Instagram or YouTube images. In 1993, I was invited to speak to the Intel Board of Directors about the future directions. And I said, among other things, I said photos and videos and music and so on. And we talked about movies and video. And they said, yes, oh yes, we believe in the future people will download Hollywood videos. And I said, yes, that's true. But in the future, I said, 1 million people will upload their own videos. And they could not believe that this would be possible. Okay? And of course, I underestimated because it's 1 billion people who have uploaded their own videos. The capacity to create and then disseminate is the driving force of what people really want. And that's what will get you further. Digital photography, navigation, business formation, whether it's Airbnb, Etsy, or eBay, or Uber, or Lyft, or whatever your business model is, all these change the game and amplify individual ability by 1,000-fold. And the goal that I'm going to emphasize today, which is in line with this next Tuesday event, do go, trust and responsibility in design, next Tuesday. Trusted, reliable, and safe. I'll call it TRS. The goal is TRS, trusted, reliable, and safe systems, and to make more people more creative more often, so as to build their sense of self-efficacy and bring the societal benefits. That's where I think the large game is going to be. Okay, so the way to get there required me to make a big change in my thinking. And in the first edition of the book, there was a chapter that was talked about balancing automation and human control. And the belief then, propagated, I would say most strongly by Tom Sheridan, an industrial engineering professor at MIT, who for 40 years described the 10 levels of automation, that you start from human control and you move up as you progress to make fully automated systems. Okay? And there were 10 steps which he described along the way. And I believe that also. And when I wrote the first edition, I described the ways in which you could move towards increased computer automation. And in last years, I began to change my attitude, and by the 5th and 6th editions, I changed that chapter to a more mystical notion of ensuring human control while increasing the level of automation. Now, at first you may think this is a bit of a mystical koan, something that's, what is this puzzle about? But I think I can spell it out and separate out the two dimensions that I thought Tom Sheridan had unfortunately pushed into one dimension. And the two dimensions are the degree of control you have, which can go from computer control to human control, and the levels of automation. And it became clear to me, or became increasingly clear, that the goal was to have high levels of human control and high levels of automation. Now at first that may seem a mystical kind of thing, and how do I achieve it? But it requires a shift in attitude about what we mean by automation. So is there a thermostat around here? Right, so there's a thermostat. So this thermostat, or even the simpler traditional thermostats, you could say it's a form of automation that makes a decision for you and takes control away from you. It's a way of, removing control and automating. But I began to think that the way to perceive it was, it's a way of increasing my control over the temperature of the room. By setting the thermostat, I get what I want more reliably more of the time. Similarly, cruise control in the car was a way that I could ensure that the car would drive at a certain speed. And these devices were designed according to the principles of comprehensible, predictable, and controllable. That I knew what was going on. If it seemed too warm, I could go and turn it back down. That if I wanted to understand what was going to happen, I could see it. And similarly, I think the applications that I see that have high degrees of automation have ways that the user is in control. So the elevator, you come up to the elevator, you press the button, the light goes on and says, got the message. Informative feedback, basic principle. The elevator's coming, and it's down on the 6th floor, coming down to the 1st floor. The door opens, bing, you walk in, you press, you're going up to the 4th floor, the light goes on, the doors close. You could stop them from closing if you want, and then it shows you the status as you get from the 1st to the 4th floor. Okay? And that sense of clarity and a sense of control that you're in charge of it, that you're going to get what you want in a reliable and trusted way, is the essence of successful automation. Okay? So I would paint this in a different way now as a two-dimensional matrix, okay, to suggest that the sweet spot is high levels of human control and high levels of automation. And we're going to take a look at the landscape of automation. And let me just sort of lay out a little preface here. There's many kinds of automation. So there's basic automations for film reviews, or book reviews, or restaurant reviews, and recommender systems. Those are fine, and those are good examples of statistical methods being applied, and maybe we could say AI or machine learning is applied there as well. And that's a very powerful mechanism, and it's a good one, because if it's not correct, it's not so dangerous, it's not so terrible if you get a strange recommendation. In fact, a surprising movie recommendation or a book might be a good thing. And so the imperfections of those algorithms turns out to be a possible virtue. Then you move on to the areas in which Kathy O'Neill's book talks about, of consequential decisions, of medical decisions, of business decisions, of legal decisions, of military decisions, or financial decisions, where it will matter. And there, we may want more than 90% accuracy and more than 99% accuracy, and denial of parole or denial of a mortgage may be really consequential. But I want to move on to the other parts of the landscape which are more device-oriented, so they're more familiar. So there are places in this landscape where you want full automation. Okay? Airbag deployment within 150 milliseconds is a classic example. You want it to happen rapidly and correctly, and reliably. And reliably. And in fact, airbags save about 2,500 lives a year in this country. But in the early days, they killed about 200 people inadvertently because the airbags deployed inappropriately. They were out of control. They were poorly designed. The degree of automation was not good. The accuracy, the trusted and reliableness was not built into the system. The engineers were unaware that they could cause the deaths of frail older adults or infants. And those things have been changed. We can look at civil aviation as an exemplary case where, over the years, good feedback has led to positive outcomes and very safe. However, the current case of the 737 MAX is the poster child for excessive automation. There, if there ever was a killer robot and a deadly AI, where the design by the Boeing engineers was inappropriate and created a sense of excessive autonomy. I've studied in depth the past many months that story, but yesterday I read a remarkable article in the New York Times that had the most potent language I've ever seen in the New York Times, just condemning the way the airlines, the training agencies, and many organizations can work together in this case. I mean, it doesn't take away from my belief that design was the central problem, but there would have been many other opportunities to deal with it. I encourage you to read that article. Okay, now there are other places where we don't want automation. We want to play the piano, and we want to ride our bicycles because it's a great pleasure, a sense of satisfaction and efficacy. Oh yes, I know, we may want to have a player piano or have a streaming music service that will give us automated music, but there are times we want to play the piano. And bicycle, I don't know if anyone's built an AI-driven bicycle. Anybody seen one of those? But there are some places we really are not interested in automation because we do want that sense of our own accomplishment, and we should respect and value that. Now, the current discussions revolve around an important issue of cars and self-driving cars. And I recently I've ridden in Teslas before, but I recently rode the Model 3, the new one that came out. And it's a very interesting example about how the potential is there. I'm all in favor of having trusted, reliable, and safe cars, but that's where I want to be, a TRS car. A trusted, reliable, and safe car, and I say that self-driving cars are not yet there, and the current designs have a lot of risks. The 2016 death from a Tesla accident, which was studied by the National Transportation Safety Board, produced a really thoughtful 60-page and very readable report that you can get, from the National Transportation Safety Board to describe the problems there. And there are things that I'm going to address briefly about how we need to change. But that's the goal, to move our automation into the upper right-hand corner, to have trusted, reliable, and safe automation that comes from designs that are comprehensible, predictable, and controlled. Okay? Now there's lots of other devices, like the elevator that I mentioned, and there are other places we need higher levels of automation, like pacemakers. The Roomba, again, not such a consequential one, but Roomba does run about and do its thing, and then digital cameras maybe are a wonderful example of all the complexities, because digital cameras have a high degree of automation of aperture setting and control of light and even focus and other aspects of that, but it gives you full control of where you take the picture. You should take a picture right here, right? I should take a picture of the audience here. But it gives me full control of where I am and how I zoom in and what's the key features in the photo. So in every application, we're going to see a variety of issues where some aspects we want automated and some aspects we want to maintain control. And I suggest that the current thinking has made a more dichotomous choice. It's autonomous systems, and the goal is autonomy, and the goal is not autonomy. The goal is control. The goal is of human control. Okay, so the takeaway message here is that we want high levels of human control and automation. That's a break from the past, and what we want to achieve are trusted, reliable, and safe, not just 95% of the time, but higher levels. The way we get it is comprehensible, predictable, and controllable design, continuous display of status, and informative. All right, so let me just take another breath, and maybe I should ask any questions, any challenges at this point. Thank you.
So I'm curious, as we get more trusted, reliable, and safe automation, if that's likely in your kind of two-dimensional grid, if that's likely to push us from that top right sweet spot where we want to be into a place where humans, even though they have the ability to use this control because it's so reliable and trusted, they choose to put their self-driving car closer to the airbag, and so even if we're designing it in such a way that full control is possible, yes, we end up in a place where it's present but not used.
That is a real danger, and I think we'll come to the deadly ends of that, and I think 737 gets you that way. When the engineers or designers believe that they can make a safe and reliable system, and as you know, the 777 story was the 737, the early version 50 years ago had a 50-inch intake for the turbofans. The new version had a 90-inch intake, okay? And this was driven by the desire for greater fuel efficiency and greater range that the purchasing companies pushed onto Boeing, okay? That large engine could no longer fit under the wing, therefore was moved forward and upwards, creating an instability that would cause the plane to rise up and stall, okay? Boeing decided, the engineers, that they could make a system which would automatically set the trim and elevator to prevent those stalls from happening. Okay? They did not provide any explanation or training that was removed from the user manuals. The pilots did not know about it. The displays did not indicate the status of the system, and the options available to the pilots were not displayed, because the belief was that they could do what you were suggesting before. They could make a completely automated system. And that's where the deadly outcome that killed 346 people in these Lion Air and Ethiopian Air crashes that happened almost a year ago. So I do see there's a real risk. I think the same with Tesla. In the car I rode, in the Tesla car, it did not accept auto steering when it was a busy urban place. It was in Boston, actually. But once you got into a more open road, it did accept it. I was quite impressed by the way it displayed the vehicles on the side, not just a vehicle, but a car or a big van or a big truck. They were all visually shown. And it did build some confidence, but my colleague who was showing this car to me, she said, I don't turn on all the features because I don't trust them. Okay? So there's a danger, and one of the things that the NTSB report says, just because you think you can automate something does not mean you should. Okay, that's a very powerful lesson. Anyway, so yes, I think there will be risks based, so we have many other examples, the flash crashes of 2010 and 2015 in the stock market that each lost hundreds of billions of dollars, were caused again by the belief that an automated system, the rationalism model that believed that we could make a perfect and stable and always effective. Similarly, the Google flu trends stories of 2009, when the prediction algorithms would show in advance where flu outbreaks would occur, was widely celebrated. By 2011, Google removed it from the website because it was not working. And in the David Lazer's analysis of that, he described algorithmic hubris. Difficult phrase, but algorithmic hubris. Hubris was the belief that you could make a perfectible algorithm. So yes, the danger you allude to is apparent. Yes, one more in the back. Oh, thanks.
It's really quick. I was wondering about, since you were talking a lot about sort of like actions where the automation goes sort of awry, What about when maybe it's interpretation of your intent goes awry?
Oh yes, certainly. Another danger, we never want to have interpretation of intent. We don't want inference. We want inference-free systems. We want systems that I can express my intent, but the system doesn't have to interpret it because I can express it accurately. Okay? We'll come back to that a little more. Let me just sort of say the design principles of where we're going and where the research is needed still. 30 years ago, I think we had this base level out there. The idea of comprehensible, predictable, and controllable was, I think, quite commonly expressed. It's in the Apple and Microsoft guidelines. It's later in the Google guidelines. The notion of direct manipulation, a term I coined to describe that world where you drag a file into the folder and it goes there. It goes there because you did it. It doesn't have to figure out what your intent is, because your intent is explicit and no inference is needed. Okay? And then the idea of trusted, reliable, and safe. So where we are today is these are the three pieces, and I'm running out of time, so I'm going to push ahead a little bit here. And the goal, as I've said already, is to make more people more creative more often, and that brings us the sense of self-efficacy, which I think is the direction and society. So the responsibility issue comes under these phrases that are currently popular: accountable, liable, fairness, transparency, explainability, and interpretability. So I guess, this brings us to the fundamental question. Do you think, show of hands, how many people think a computer or a robot can be responsible for its actions? Nobody. Oh, one, yes, okay. So it is, there's a belief out there that could be responsible and maybe liable and morally responsible. But I think there's a general acceptance that responsibility is not something that ever will be in robots, that only humans and organizations are responsible. In 1979, the first robot death industrial in this country was at Ford Motor Company, where a robot arm got blocked. The operator climbs up, releases the arm swings around and kills the operator. Okay? There are about 65 deaths from robots in the US since then. But in that case, Ford Motor said, we're not responsible, it's the robot. And the judge said, no way, and punitive damages and triple damages, because that's not appropriate legal or ethical or moral defense. Okay? Now, we might step back and say, how many of you would grant agency to robots or algorithms? Maybe. Agency is a slippery word. The ethicist Deborah Johnson at the University of Virginia does grant agency, but not responsibility. Okay? Now, we might say control, and then we might say decision. Do robots or thermostats make decisions? And I don't want to get too far into this, but I've come to see increasingly, I would say no to any of those, that robots or thermostats are merely devices with no more intelligence than a wooden pencil. And that we will see more and more clearly over time, even as they get more powerful, that what we want are designs that are like pencils, that we draw. When we write and draw or sketch with a pencil, we make the drawing. It's not the pencil that makes the drawing. Okay? We want powerful automation, but we want that sense of our personal control. Now, a longer technical talk about the ways of accomplishing it. There are four things I want. They're under the ABCD idea, but the first one is audit trails to review failures and near misses. This is where, again, civil aviation has been a positive example. The flight data recorders are one of the powerful ways we have made progress. And I'm just asking for a flight data recorder for every robot and for every AI algorithm, so that you can retrospectively replay and find out where the source of the problem is. Again, there's a longer discussion. I've spoken at other times about a national algorithms safety board that would have the same investigatory powers as the National Transportation Safety. Benchmark tests for verification and validation, generally widely accepted. I think the standards for that and how do we validate, especially when we have training data sets that may vary over time and may no longer accurately describe the context of use. Continuous improvement and process monitoring, the way you get feedback. So the the Food and Drug Administration, just up here on New Hampshire Avenue, has an adverse event reporting system that brings in thousands of adverse drug event reports. And I think having an open process for reporting such failures for robots and AI systems is important. The FAA, again, gets high marks for, they have an open website by which pilots, air traffic controllers, the general public can report any evidence about misses and near misses. Data quality and bias testing, this is a lot of what the FATML community, fair, accountable, and transparent machine learning has been working on, and I do see progress. There's a larger circle. Besides designing the technology itself, you want to design a social structure around the technology to ensure its continuous improvement and its quality. And the idea of independent oversight is what I've come to stress as a central issue. So government regulation is one way. A National Algorithm Safety Board would be one. And I think we're seeing that already. NIST recently got the, was moved forward on this. The Food and Drug Administration, the FTC, the FCC are each moving to develop the expertise by which they can at least monitor. Regulation has a nasty phrase side to it. In this administration, they're not looking for regulation. But we know that successfully designed regulation, like automobile regulation about safety standards of seatbelts and energy efficiency, have elicited, they're very successful, and they've produced enormous innovations. So there can be well-done regulations. Insurance companies may turn out to be our friends, as they have been for the building industry, that insurance companies have stipulated and pressured to produce the idea of building codes, and designed for the building codes, and it stipulates that for every point within a building, there should be 2 forms of egress within 150 feet, for example, or structural strength, or electrical, and so all those things are moving forward. The 4 main accounting firms, KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte, so on, are moving ahead to become the auditors for these companies. As you know, every one of the publicly listed companies in the U.S., the Securities Exchange Commission requires that there be an external independent audit as well as an internal audit. And voluntary industry plans, the partnership on AI, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, and so on, they really do want this to turn out well, and so they're working on it. And then professional societies. If you read one of the 200 reports that I've read, the one from IEEE called Ethically Aligned Design was the one. Ethically Aligned Design. I should have had it figured out. All right, the second pillar here is this participation at scale. And humans are essentially social characters, and they want to participate and communicate with people. And we've begun to see how this has played out. The computing community consistently underestimates the desire that people want to face, want email or Facebook or social media, but there's a strong desire. And the question is, how are we going to make those things turn out well? I'm not going to stay long on this topic, but I'll say I'm struck by the wide number and the growing number of these forms by which you can support collaboration in small teams under 10, in middle-sized teams of 10 to 100 or 1,000, and in million-person communities that collectively can work together. If you ever want to be inspired positively about life, go to the Wikimania conference. I've been twice. And you will see thousands of young people, especially, who are working together in a community of millions to build this positive service. And the social structures that they have put into place have created this. I'm giving a talk next month under the title of The Next 10 Wikipedias, which expands on this and talks about the social dimensions that we can have yet to exploit. Okay, and I'm going to close with the most speculative part, what I call frontier thinking. And I believe fundamentally that humans have unbounded creative powers, and what you want to do is give them the tools that enable them to push past the frontier, okay? And to go boldly where no person has gone before. Okay, so if you think about the decades-long evolution of technologies, from steamships to diesel trains, gasoline engines, electric cars, TRS cars, and what's after that? that these things don't come from an AI, machine learning approach, which is based on training data, because that only replicates the past. The capacity to break free and see something new is really what's important. Computers in the 1950s were then woven together in local area nets, woven together with the internet, World Wide Web on top of that, social media on top of that, fake news on top of that. Not always does it go well, but I want to remind you that both positive, pro-social, as well as malicious actors are taking whatever technology has been developed and pushing past it in creative ways. And our failure, including my own, to anticipate the malicious actors that would take control over social media, we just didn't think 10 years ago. I had written with some caution, I went back to read what I wrote about dangers, but the dangers turned out to be more extreme than I thought. We believed correctly that social media would give people at the margins a voice. But we didn't quite anticipate how the hateful actors, the terrorists, the criminals would take over this technology. And we failed to put in the protections that are so necessary. So again, it's another example that the degree of automation was high, but the control was lost. And it was most clearly lost the day that Facebook introduced Newsfeed, which took away control over what was in your newsfeed and left you with inadequate tools for managing what you get. And those are the moments I think we should better understand. I mean, other examples, mainframe programs went to desktop applications, to websites, mobile apps. What's next? Can you think about it? Can you open your mind and think what's after that? And just, a few more. I mean, assembly language to Fortran and C, C++, Java, Python. What's next? What is the next form? Is it D3 or what might it be? And then, all these other technologies, they grow. And I'm trying to open up the pathways in your thinking to be ambitious and bold and take it not just a little bit forward, but a bolder step that serves human needs. Similarly, photography, my favorite hobby, and from daguerreotype in 1839, the tintype in the 1850s, 1888, George Eastman's Kodak camera, which opened up to a wider range of people, the Polaroid camera, single lens reflex, and the digital camera. What's next after that? So, the ways that you get there, this is, again, a longer discussion and where I think we have a lot to do. Joel Chan's maybe the hero in this topic. But studying real users doing real work to identify human needs. Recognize the desire. People want to be creative. They want to be creative. They want to engage socially. They want a sense of their own mastery, self-efficacy, and their own accomplishment. How do you offer people that opportunity? How do you develop the inspirational metaphors, the scenarios, the causal models, and I think visualization is the heart of these things.